In the heart of a bustling city, a powerful CEO is racing against time to secure a multi-million-dollar contract. In his haste, his expensive suit is torn. Deeply worried that his flawless image will be ruined in front of a demanding client, he rushes into a rundown tailor shop, hoping for a quick fix. The moment he steps inside, he is immediately drawn to the skilled craftsmanship and unwavering resilience of the single mother and her young son who run the shop to repay them for the free repair he makes. An important decision, one that will help mend not just fabric, but also the struggles weighing them down. The city was suffocating beneath the weight of its own movement. Towering buildings loomed over congested streets, their reflective surfaces catching the sharp morning sun, turning entire blocks into a blinding maze of glass and steel. Down below the roads were battlefield cars inching forward in agonizing bursts, horns screaming in frustration, delivery trucks clogging narrow intersections. Pedestrians moved in frantic waves, pushing past one another, balancing coffee cups, briefcases, and the never-ending race against time. Inside a sleek black sedan, David Miller sat motionless, jaw-clenched, fingers tapping in erratic rhythm against the leather armrest. The air conditioning hummed quietly at sharp contrast to the chaos outside, but it did nothing to cool the heat rising in his chest. His eyes flicked to the dashboard clock. 30 minutes, that's all he had before the meeting began. The meeting that could cement his position at the top or send him tumbling into irrelevance. He exhaled through his nose, controlled but tense. The deal had been in the works for months. The client was a perfectionist, a woman known for her ruthless efficiency and uncompromising standards. A single misstep, one sign of carelessness, weakness, or poor preparation would be enough to cost him everything. His phone buzzed on the center console. He barely glanced at the name before swiping it open. The message was short, almost mocking. Jason Harris, see you there. Miller, hope you don't get stuck in traffic. Would be ashamed to miss out. A slow burn ignited in David's chest. Of course he was on his way. Jason Harris was like a damn vulture, always circling, waiting for the slightest stumble so he could swap in and take what wasn't his. He was relentless, cutthroat, and unfortunately very good at what he did. If Jason got to the meeting first, it wouldn't just be a disadvantage, it would be a death sentence for David. Chances. He sat up straighter, scanning the road ahead. Nothing had moved, not an inch. The lanes were completely locked up, a sea of a honking car stretching endlessly into the distance. He gritted his teeth. This wasn't going to work. With a sharp movement, David yanked open the car door. Sir, his driver barely had time to react before David was already stepping out, his polished dress shoes hitting the hot pavement. Take the car back, he said, barely turning his head. I'll get there faster on foot. And then he was off. The moment he turned into the alley, the noise of the city dampened slightly, though the air remained thick with heat and the scent of asphalt. His footsteps echoed against the brick walls as he moved fast, but calculated. Years of navigating the corporate world had taught him the importance of efficiency. No wasted time, no wasted effort. He wove through the narrow path, dodging discarded crates, stepping over puddles of stagnant rainwater. The scent of fresh bread wafted from a bakery's back door, mingling with the accurate stink of overfilled dumpsters baking in the sun. Then it happened, a sharp tug against his side, sudden and jarring, the unmistakable sound of fabric tearing. He stopped short. His heartbeat was already elevated from running, but now it slammed against his ribs for an entirely different reason. Slowly, he looked down. The tear was massive, stretching from his chest down toward his ribs. A jagged wound in the expensive fabric. David's stomach twisted. He could already hear the client's voice in his head, dissecting the implications. Sloppy, careless, unprepared. He knew how these things worked. Optics mattered. He couldn't walk into that meeting looking like this. It didn't matter if his proposal was airtight or if his numbers were better than Jason's first. Impressions were everything. His mind raced. There had to be something somewhere. Then he saw it tucked between two old brick buildings. A small tailor shop sat nearly invisible, its faded sign barely legible. The display window was cluttered with aged fabric, half-finished garments draped over mannequins that had seen better days. A single ceiling fan whirred lazily inside, pushing around the warm morning air. Not ideal, but it was his only choice. David pushed open the door. A small bell overhead chiming his arrival. The air inside was different, warmer, carrying the scent of fabric and something faintly metallic, like the lingering traces of an old sewing machine. It was quieter too, the city's chaos. As the boy continued his work in the corner for the first time that morning, David felt still. 7 minutes later, Mary tied the last knot, snipped the excess thread, and handed him the jacket song. Roy David took it, running his fingers over the flower that now covered the tear seamless clean, as if it had always been there. He exhaled, pulled out his wallet, and froze. Only credit cards, no cash. His gaze flicked to Mary, then back to the tiny shop, the aging walls, the worn floorboards, the frayed edges of the boy's notebook. This was a place barely scraping by. He knew it, she knew it. Without a word, he reached for his hand, twisted his gold ring from his finger, and placed it on the counter. Ko Toi Trong. Mary didn't even blink. She pushed the ring. Day Toi Kong Nandal, she said simply, then reaching behind the counter, she pulled out a cool, damp cloth and handed it to him. ANLD. She added TR Suchin Cap K Kang. David hesitated, fingers brushing against the fabric. For the first time in a long time, he was caught off guard, but he took it, and as he walked out the door, pulling the now perfect jacket back over his shoulders, something inside him, something he couldn't quite name, shifted the moment David stepped out of the tailor shop. The heat of the morning hit him again, pressing against his skin. Heavy and unreal, lenting the world outside had moved on, indifferent to the seconds he had lost, the minutes slipping through his fingers. His pulse was still elevated, his body wired from the sprint through the alley, the unexpected detour, the time he didn't have. He pressed the damp cloth to his face, inhaling the faint scent of detergent and clean linen, wiping away the sweat that clung to his brow. 20 minutes left. That was all. He moved fast. His shoes struck the pavement in sharp, deliberate steps. That tailored fabric of his suit settling back into place, as if nothing had ever been wrong, except something had. The sensation of the embroidered flower against his chest was impossible to ignore. It wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, the stitching was flawless, but it was there, a reminder, a quiet contradiction stitched into the very fabric of who he was. He pushed it aside. It didn't matter, not now. The corporate tower loomed ahead, all glass and steel, sterile in its perfection, the moment he stepped inside. The city noise dulled, replaced by the quiet hum of wealth, the kind of silence only money could buy. His own reflection stared back at him from the polished elevator doors. As they slid open, his face unreadable, controlled inside. He adjusted his cuffs, his collar a final check, sharp, professional, uncompromised, but his fingers hesitated over the embroidered flower. He dropped his hand before he could think about it. The conference room was bathed in natural light, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, a breathtaking display of power and success. At the far end of the table sat Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who held the fate of the contract in her hands. Everything about her was curated, the precision of her movements, the sharpness in her eyes, the way she didn't waste time on anything unnecessary. And across from her, Jason Harris, already seated, already smiling. That knowing, practiced smile. David didn't hesitate. He owned the room the moment he walked in. David, Eleanor said, her voice measured her gaze, assessing. You're cutting it close. Jason leaned back in his chair, ever so slightly, enough to imply comfort, control. I was just telling Eleanor how much I admire punctuality, shows discipline. David smiled, not forced, not rushed, just enough. Good thing I'm on time. Then he sat. He could feel Jason's eyes flicker down just briefly, taking him in, assessing, searching. And then Eleanor, she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at his jacket, at the flower. It was subtle, the way her head tilted just slightly, the way her fingers tapped once against the table, as if making a mental note, a detail noticed, but not questioned. Jason saw it too, and he didn't understand. That was the difference between them. The meeting began. Numbers, projections, logistics. David navigated it all with practiced ease. He was prepared. He was always prepared, but something about today felt different, not because of what he was saying, but because of how he felt saying it. Confident, collected, steady, and Jason knew it. He saw it in the way his competitor's smile tightened, in the way his rebuttal came just a second too late, in the way Eleanor's attention never once strayed from D. When the meeting ended, it was done. The deal was made. The contract was his. Jason knew it too. David saw it in the way he adjusted his tie, his expression smooth, but his eyes sharp with restrained irritation. Well played, Niller, he said, his voice easy but hollow. Guess we'll see how it works out for you. David just smiled, shaking Eleanor's hand firmly. I think we both know how it's going to work out. As he turned to leave, Eleanor spoke once more. That embroidery on your jacket. He stopped. J.